HELPS in maintaining pH of blood, transport of gases. Oxygen and carbon dioxide are transported in between lungs and tissue through blood. Blood carried oxygen from lungs, i.e. respiratory surface, to tissue. Here oxygen is utilized for production of energy by mitochondria in cells. During this process carbon dioxide is generated, which is collected and transported by blood to lungs. 1. Transport of oxygen. Oxygen is transported in blood in two forms, A. Physically dissolved form, and B. Chemically bound to hemoglobin. Body consumes 250 ml O2 per minute. A. Physically dissolved oxygen. 7. BCC. I. Physiology of respiration. Dr. K. Gaheri. Oxygen poorly soluble in plasma. So very little amount of total oxygen carried by the blood is in this form. It counts 1.5%. The dissolved O2 is directly proportional to PO2 of blood. At normal arterial PO2 of 100 mm of mercury, 3 ml O2 dissolves in 1 liter of blood. So on an average 15 ml O2 is carried in dissolved form per minute. B. Chemically bound O2 to hemoglobin. A hemoglobin, Hb, is a conjugate protein with heme as its prosthetic group. Heme is an iron-containing group. Single hemoglobin molecule contains 4 heme groups and 4 globin chains. 2.
Μικρό α.
Globin and 2.
Μικρό β.
Globin, 2. It is present in red blood corpuscle. It can form a loose reversible complex with oxygen. Hemoglobin without O2 is referred as reduced hemoglobin, and with oxygen is oxyhemoglobin. Oxyhemoglobin does not contribute to PO2. 3. Each Hb molecule carries 4 molecules of O2 combined with heme portion. Hb with all 4 heme groups combined with O2 is called saturated Hb, IV. The most important factor determining saturation of Hb is PO2, i.e. dissolved O2, V in lungs. As oxygen diffuses from alveolar air to pulmonary blood, PO2 goes on increasing from 40 mm of mercury to 100 mm of mercury. This facilitates the uptake of O2 by Hb, and Hb gets saturated. Vi. In tissue, as plasma oxygen from systemic blood diffuses out in tissue fluid, so PO2 of plasma decreases. This reduces the affinity of Hb towards O2, and it is released from Hb. 7. 2 other important factors which affect saturation of Hb are PCO2 of and acidity of blood plasma. 8. At tissue, PCO2 in plasma goes on increasing, which causes release of O2 from oxyhemoglobin. Secondly, when CO2 reacts with the water in plasma, it forms carbonic I2. 3. HHB plus O in lungs, HbO22, reduced hemoglobin. At tissue, oxyhemoglobin acid, which increases acidity of plasma, facilitates unloading of O2. 2. Transport of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is transported in blood in 3 ways. Dissolved in plasma. B. Chemically bound to Hb, and C. As bicarbonate ions. A. Physically dissolved CO2. CO2 is more soluble in water than O2, so more CO2 is carried in this form as compared to O2. 2. 10% of total CO2 is carried in this form. B. Chemically bound to Hb. CO2 combines to Hb to form carbaminohemoglobin. CO2 binds to the globin part of Hb. 2. It has greater affinity towards reduced Hb than HbO2. So at tissue level, after unloading O2, reduced Hb combines with CO2. 3. About 30% of CO2 is transported in this form, C as bicarbonate. 60% of CO2 is transported as bicarbonates. 2. CO2 reacts with the water in plasma to form carbonic acid, which dissociated to form bicarbonate ions in H+. The reaction is as follows: HHB plus CO2 reduced hemoglobin. At tissue in lungs, HbCO2 carbaminohemoglobin. 8. BCC. I. Physiology of respiration. Dr. K. Gaheri. 3. IV. VI. First step of this reaction occurs very slowly in plasma, but in RBC it takes place rapidly. This is because an enzyme, carbonic anhydrase, which catalyzes the reaction present in RBC. As this reaction proceeds, bicarbonate ions NH+ accumulate in RBC. Bicarbonate diffuses out of RBC by passive transport, but the membrane is less permeable to H+. Since